the tape for this, our main event of the evening. We introduce the champion, Chris, the West Side Strangler Brennan. Let's get it on!
Hey guys, welcome back. We are here to recap the Bellator versus Rizin New Year's Eve show. Awesome card, man. It was exciting. Unfortunately, all 5 fights went the distance.
That surprised me.
That's what happens a lot of times when you have good guys against good guys.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point.
If there was 5 finishes, the other guys weren't even comparable. They weren't on the same level. But since it was 5, and it was actually 5 close fights. I think Pitbull was the only one that ran away with his. Everyone else was a close fight.
Talk about scoring a little bit before we get into the actual fights. They don't do a traditional 10-point scoring. Is that correct?
Yeah, they judge on the whole fight.
Okay.
They judge by aggression, by what were the
damage?
Damage. It was damage number 1, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I think there was like aggression and ring control.
Yeah, that was 3rd. Ring control was 3rd.
So it's just really an eye test. I mean, it's similar. I mean, I guess Bellator and UFC are still an eye test. They just put numbers against it. But.
Yeah. It was basically still. So I'll talk about it when I get to it. But I had a funny story about AJ's fight.
Okay.
Thought it was one way when it was another, but we'll get to that.
Okay. I was the other thing. 2 things that stood out for me. Number one, when the production started. Boy, the level of production inside that house, the lasers, the lights,
you can't touch
it was a show, man. Yeah. It was cool.
Pride's intros and the opening ceremonies was just the most amazing thing ever. Like, it was literally better than anything that anyone had seen, and they started replicating that. I'm guilty of not watching the Rizin fights. I don't even know how or what they're on when they're normally on.
Yeah.
But I see the results and I see highlights and stuff, but I've not watched an event, so I don't know if they're all this way. But it was awesome to see. It was very nostalgic for me. Fighting at my first Pride fight was in the Saitama Super Arena where they fought. The only thing missing was Lenny, the lady who announces everyone.
Yeah.
Because she's got this insane voice, and it's like, when my last name would be like, crazy. And she does it for everyone, different. And apparently she had some sort of throat thing.
Yeah.
And
she
wasn't,
do it.
yeah, she wasn't there.
So is that is that like Japanese version of Buffer? Is that
way better?
But way better.
Way better. Like, I love Bruce, but her announcement is just insane. It's awesome.
That's awesome. The other thing I wanted to ask about before we got in was clock management. I noticed a couple times, and I don't know if you saw this, I noticed a couple times where the clock looked like it was going to be at zeros, and then the clock was gone, and they kept fighting for a little bit. Did you catch that?
No.
It was pretty weird. And I think...
So that wouldn't surprise me at all, because that's definitely stuff that's happened to us in Juarez, Mexico.
Okay.
And I told you, crazy things will happen. If the fight was going longer, that had to be in a round that one of the Rizin guys was winning.
I went back, I was thinking about it, and I'm wondering, in soccer, if there's an injury or something, they give you like extra time, and that's almost what it felt like, is if they reposition somebody, if there was a change in the round.
So if, let's say sometimes you saw them going out of bounds or out of the ring, and they'd stop them and bring it back in the middle, the time was stopped at that time. So they might have added it on on the restart. Yeah, that's possible.
Okay.
But I'm not sure how that played out. I didn't see that.
Okay. Well, let's jump into the fights. Again, as you said, great fights. The first one was Godzi Rabadanov versus Koji Takeda. Again, you already said that these all went the distance. This was a unanimous decision for Rabadanov.
It started off a barn burner. Like,
holy cow.
There was maybe 30 seconds in, he dropped him and instantly used the rules. As he dropped him and he hit his butt, he started to sit up and he jumped straight through with a knee right to the head, set him right back to his butt again. And I was like, oh man. And it looked like it was going to be a TKO in that first little bit. I couldn't believe that he recovered and came back and went the distance.
Well, Takeda, he got knocked down, stood up, and then you see him stumble almost all the way across the ring and fall down again. And at that point, I'm like,
the knee.
holy cow. Like, is there... So Jason Herzog, I did want to mention this. Herzog was the ref for all 5 fights.
Yeah, that was awesome. I talked to him for a little while afterwards.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah, super cool.
Do you know how he got selected?
So I didn't know it, but in talking to him, he had said that before COVID, he had been over there for, I want to say he said 4 years, working, working on something. I forget what he said, and I don't want to misquote him, but he has been over there, consistently for a while before that. So I'm sure, he had an in, and he's the best. He's the best ref right now. Like, in my opinion, he's the best referee.
Okay.
And so the fact that he got chosen to do all 5 fights, as he was there for the second one, typically people rotate.
Yeah.
As he was there for the second one, I was like, oh man, I wonder if he's going to be there all night. And as he was there for the third, it's like, yeah, for sure he is.
All night.
So that was very cool to get to see.
Did Takeda look big to you?
Super big.
He was
super
thick.
big.
His legs looked thick, and his back.
Donoff was lean and was jacked, but not like the other guy was just big. He looked heavy.
Yeah, I was surprised to see the difference in size because Takeda looked really big. And to your point, I had this. I was taking notes as I went through and watched it. Man, Takeda has a chin.
Dude, I couldn't believe his recovery.
I could not believe.
And then Rob Donoff, second round, was gassed. Like, he came back. He won the fight, but he had put so much into that first round that he looked gassed in the second round. And I was like, oh no. And then he kind of brought it back together. But that was a close fight when it all got to the end. It was a fairly close fight.
So round 2, there was a lot of time up against in the corner, and I believe that Takeda was on bottom, Rabadonov was on top, kind of working him. There was a lot of time there. There was an amazing roll. I don't remember if it was in the second or the third round where Takeda rolled out and was able to escape. That was super athletic of him, and I was
Granby.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah,
it was super.
Back to his feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the last thing that I had notes on this one was the very last 20 seconds. Rabadonov connected with a body kick. Takeda went for a body kick, but Rabadonov connected, I think, with an overhand, and it dropped him, and then he jumped on him and threw a fist. And you saw Takeda. I've never seen a fighter react in his face. He's like, you could see him just contort his face. Like, that really hurt. And I kind of feel like that almost took the fight, because going into round 3, I think it was 1-1, and I feel like that might have been...
I'm trying to think if it was that round or the first round when his head was outside of the ropes and just eating punches. He was eating hard punches. Like, man, what a chin on this guy. And Jason's just standing there watching, making sure, he's good. His eyes are clear.
Talk about, there were a lot of people on the production side that were managing the ropes and keeping people. Obviously, in a cage, you don't have to deal with that.
Yeah.
They're keeping the ropes like straight and stuff.
The ropes are really tight. They're literally as tight as the cage fence, the cage chain link.
Okay.
But there's obviously spaces between them.
Yeah.
So there are guys on the outside that will push you in. Lucas had never seen that. And he was watching. He goes, I've never seen them do that before. I was like, oh yeah, they do it all the time. You'll watch the fight when I armbarred the guy there. My legs and something else were outside the ropes, and they were pushing us in. And they'll move around the ring and keep them in.
Is that distracting as a fighter to feel somebody else's hands on your body pushing you somewhere that's not your opponent?
Yeah, maybe. It definitely can be. You have to know, obviously, what part of the fight you're in when that's happening, and knowing that it's not getting stopped. The referee's not jumping in to stop it. They're pushing you because you're outside the ropes, or elbows are outside the ropes, or sometimes you would get guys that would reach over one rope to punch underneath, and or up the other way, and that's legal as long as you're not holding on the rope. So it's a lot different. Like I said, the cage in the ring is way different.
In Bellator and the UFC, using the cage, you can't even link your toes around it. Like, you cannot use the cage in any way.
Right.
Are they as strict using the ropes?
Yeah, they'll smack your hand off right away, pull your hand off right away.
Great fight. It was cool to see. Rabadanov win that one. I think it was a unanimous decision, but I felt like going into the decision, I felt like it
Yeah,
was close.
it was close.
I think it was 2-1. You know, we'd call it 29-28.
Right.
Is how I saw that one. So next fight is Juan Archuleta versus Soo Chul Kim. This was the only split decision of the evening, and I do think it was close. What'd you see in this fight?
Same thing. It was definitely close. I think all of the Bellator guys felt the fact that they had traveled to Japan by the second round.
Yeah.
You know, they all had a dip. Pitbull, I think, was the only one that didn't. And he looked good, you know, consistently chopping away at that guy. That guy used a lot of range to keep him away, so he didn't have to be as aggressive. But the other fights, everyone was pretty aggressive, and I feel like by the second round, they had kind of dipped a little bit, came back again in the third round. That's something that happened to me. My first fight over there was against Gomi, and I did the same thing. Like I hard first round, a slight dip in the second round, then came back again hard in the third round. So it's just, you know, I feel like it caught up to him, the travel caught up to him, whatever, you know, the sleep. But Juan Archuleta looked good. Both guys, you know, his opponent was tough.
I think twice Kim went for a choke that Big John called a ninja choke.
Yeah. It's basically like that rear naked choke from the front, like a high elbow, rear naked grip from the front.
And I think the first time he jumped on it, didn't he? He left his feet and tried to sink it in from the front. Am I remembering that right?
And then the second one, he ended up having to roll, and he was on bottom with it locked up.
That one looked tight.
So that's the part of the fight to me where I was like, you know, where are we at on the decision? You know, because they score also a lot on who was closest to finishing the fight, you know, and that was a close, you know, that was a close finish. I'm glad Juan won.
You could see Archuleta, his face started getting red. I mean, you could see that was tight. Kim did something that I don't think I've ever seen before. He almost was doing this running in place thing where he was kind of dancing a little bit, and it seems like to me that would be something you wouldn't want to do because you're open to leg kicks because you can't react if you're
right.
Is that?
Yeah, for sure. And he moves linear, straight forward, straight back. And Juan Archuleta has got very good footwork and moves laterally a lot. And so it kind of lined him up to get hit or to get kicked, you know, a lot. It was a weird stance.
This was the first fight, and I think it happened maybe 2 other times, but this was the first fight where the ref Jason did stop it, repositioned them, put everybody back to where they were, and then said, okay, go ahead and go again. And it seemed like it caught Archuleta off guard a little bit on that.
Yeah,
one.
and that's something they'll do, just like in a jiu-jitsu match when you're going off the mat. Same thing when you're going underneath the ropes. If they're in a spot where the action has stopped, they'll stop you and pull you back in. That's something I also want to talk about again when we get back to AJ's fight. But if you are along the ropes and not in the corner and you're going out, they will stop everything, look where you're at, pull you back in. And
I mean, they even got like underhook. They got the hand placement right, and then they're like, okay, go. And I think that was the first time I noticed the clock going weird too. And I think that reposition, they gave just a little bit of extra time.
Got it.
For that reposition. I had note in the third round, Kim was on top and they stood him up, which felt pretty quick. I was like, man, that feel like that was a quick stand up. I don't know if that stood out to you or not.
It didn't.
Okay.
Only a couple things that Jason did stood out to me, you know, aside from restarting them when they were going underneath the ropes.
Okay.
And the other one was in AJ's fight.
I thought it was ironic that Kim's walkout song was Guns N' Roses' "Welcome to the Jungle." I'm like, wow.
I was super impressed with all of Bellator's guys' walkout. They really embraced the, you know, Juan Archuleta's.
But Kim's was "Welcome to the Jungle." The Rizin guy was.
I know. I thought it was hilarious.
Like,
it was great.
That's awesome.
Super cool.
I did not expect to hear Guns N' Roses from their period, but let alone from the Rizin guys. Anything that you noticed in this fight that I didn't capture that you want to talk about?
Just that, you know, Juan Archuleta was in a war. You know, he was in a tough fight. He looked good. He looked good doing it. And I also was, you know, I wonder if people get hesitant when, like, getting knocked out by Rufion Stotts.
Yeah.
You know, that wasn't like a boom head kick, clipped the top of his head
Yep.
and knocked him out.
Yep.
You know, so are you hesitant to stand in the pocket and bang? And he wasn't.
Yeah, he went,
He wasn't.
went right in.
His chin held up.
Third fight was Ogikubo versus Horiguchi. This was a unanimous decision as well. And I didn't realize this going into it, but this was, maybe we talked about this was a trilogy.
Yeah.
And
He's won all three, though.
Horiguchi is swept. So I'm assuming that
That's done.
That's done.
That should be done.
We're over that. The calf kicks from Horiguchi in the first round were just
Brutal. He's jacked. He's
Yeah.
little, but he's jacked.
Yeah.
Real tough, man. He was a lot of fun to watch. And yes, the calf kicks were nasty.
This was the one, I think it was the last 30 seconds of maybe round number 1 where I saw Horiguchi was leaning through the ropes.
You're right.
And he
that
was
the
banging
one.
down through
Yeah.
the ropes outside, just raining down.
Clean shots. They were
Clean.
all landing.
Yes.
And that's the one Jason Herzog's looking over the top watching and is like, you know, I
like,
guess
oh.
trying to make sure his eyes are still clear and he's
Right,
good. But and he
right.
was. That guy had a chin as well, like super solid chin. Like he was eating very hard
Yeah.
fight-ending punches.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, bouncing his head
Yeah,
off. You know,
it took it.
those were brutal. But it again, that just going back to the difference in him, seeing somebody reach through the ropes like that,
Yeah.
and it's just a bizarre thing. I haven't seen that before.
Kid Yamamoto was another guy that used to fight in Pride and in Shudo, and he was a monster there. He would if you fell out, if your head was outside the ropes,
Yeah.
he was going to murder you until the ref pulled you guys apart, and just aggressive.
That was awesome. Round 2, lots of top control on both sides. I feel like Horiguchi had top control for like the first half, and then Ogikubo switched it, and
Right.
he had some top control a little bit. And then coming into round 3, it looked like they touched hands, and instantly they both threw, and Horiguchi connected, and
Yeah.
it dropped Ogikubo.
Hard. Yeah, hard.
Dropped him quick. And
He's
this
powerful.
Yeah.
He's powerful. He's a little compact dude. He's 5'5", and his opponent was 5'3".
Yeah, is that I can
Pretty
check.
sure that's what it was.
That sounds right.
They're little.
Little.
And they fought at 25 also. And Horiguchi was the Bellator 35 champ. He they don't have a 125 division, a flyweight division in Bellator yet. And so he was able to go down and fight at what looked like more his size, you know, what he should be fighting at.
Do you think that'll change for Bellator? They talked about that a little bit. Are they going to try and introduce
So
that?
I just messaged and asked about it because we were talking with Delmer, one of my guys,
Yeah.
about cutting to 25. And then I looked on the roster, and there is a flyweight button to click on, but when you open it, there's no fighters. So I'm like, I messaged like, "Are you guys gonna have a 125 soon?" And they're like, "No."
Could Delmar make 125?
I think he could. I mean, Juan Archuleta gets to 85-90 and makes 35. So
yeah.
I think so.
That'd be incredible.
Yeah.
This one ended up being a unanimous decision. I don't know that it ended up being very close. I mean, I think Horiguchi, for the most part,
Yeah, I thought it was clear that he won the fight.
won that fight. So that brings us to Pitbull versus Koike.
Yep. Clever Koike, tough guy.
Tough guy.
Used his front kick very well. Used the range very well. Caught him many times.
Yeah.
And then barely missed many times, which was going to keep Pitbull at range, you know, making it difficult for him to close the distance. Pitbull used that calf kick really well. He was chopping that calf, landing his overhand right. He was landing the power. The other guy just could not seem to get off any offense. And his jiu-jitsu's solid, so I thought he would try to wrestle more. He did not try to wrestle enough.
So, do you think that Kleber couldn't get him to the ground? I mean, there were some takedowns, but it just seemed like Pitbull wanted nothing
Well,
of it.
one time he threw him,
Yep.
and they hit the ground and rolled straight back, and they were
Yep.
both back to the feet again. But I just think he didn't. It wasn't like I tell people that train with Luke. You have to want to not go to the ground as much as he wants to get you to the ground.
Yeah.
Like if you're gonna concede to the takedown once you get into the scramble, then obviously he's going to win. And that's the same thing. This guy didn't fight hard to get to the ground. You know, he had a couple attempts, but like he was losing. You know, he was losing, and that's the one place he could have won. So I don't know why he didn't fight harder to get there.
Was he worried about his entrance and what Pitbull could do connecting with him as he tried to enter?
Sure, maybe, but like the end result still has an L.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So you might as well, at some point, you gotta throw
roll
caution to the wind and try to win the fight.
Yeah.
You gotta try to get it to where you can win the fight. And he wasn't gonna knock out Pitbull. You know, he again, he had a couple of clean front kicks to the face, but other than that, he wasn't gonna land something to knock out Pitbull when Pitbull clearly could knock him out.
Yeah.
And so he, was a little risky.
I think one of those front kicks, I feel like it was in the second round, connected pretty good, and I feel like it was. I feel like that was close. Had he connected a little bit harder, that could have been a Tony Ferguson.
It connected to the face.
Yes.
Had it connected to the chin, that could have been it.
Yeah.
You know, that was it came up and kicked his face, but it kicked the jaw up like Chandler's did on Ferguson.
Yeah.
Good chance that would have been the end of the fight.
This was of the 5 fights, this was the slowest of the fights
100%.
for me.
100%.
And I don't want to say boring because I know Pitbull was a surgeon in there.
Yeah, so he had to be, because when there is such a drastic, and I don't want to take anything away from Pitbull because he's got good jiu-jitsu and good guillotines, but there's a clear deficit in his game compared to that guy's once it hit the ground.
Yeah.
And what do I tell you? If someone's aggressive on the feet to go after you, there's the takedown. You know, that's the best time to get the takedown.
Yep.
So he had to pick him apart. You know, he could have been a little more aggressive, but at the same time, that guy, I don't know, 10 seconds, 15 seconds in the fight, almost had Pitbull's back. He had a half a takedown, went behind him, started to come up on his waist, and Pitbull stepped out and was like,
I want none of that.
Yeah, and then from that point on, there was no interactions on the ground besides the one throw back to the feet again, when he bounced back to the feet again.
Boy, Kleber was so much taller. I mean, you see this all the time. I know Pitbull's a little guy. It's old news, but I'm just reminded every time I see him how much bigger he was.
And he doesn't have to prepare specially for that, because literally every fight he's preparing for the long guy.
Yep.
So I don't even know what he would do if he had a guy that was shorter than him.
Both of them are Brazilian, correct?
Yep.
So it's cool to see them afterwards. There was a lot of good.
Yeah. So I guess Kleber, Koike, and Satoshi, the guy that AJ fought.
Yeah.
Both are from Brazil. Both live in Japan and have a gym together there.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's super cool. Pitbull's walkout, big old. It was like a Spartan almost type thing.
Super cool.
Super cool.
I think his was the clearest win of the 5 fights.
Okay.
In my opinion.
It was also kind of the slowest of the 5.
Yeah, it was for sure. For sure. No question.
AJ McKee. First thing, so is he actually related to Rampage Jackson? Is that his blood uncle, or is that just like his uncle?
Yeah, uncle.
It's like
Uncle Rampage,
right?
yeah.
Okay. I didn't know that there was a
He looked
connection
huge,
there.
huh?
Yeah,
He looked so big. I was like,
Holy cow.
who's that dude behind him? And then they said Rampage. And I'm like, but who's the guy behind him? Oh, that's Rampage. I was like, holy smokes. He looked so big.
Yeah.
So here's how everyone complained about the fights being delayed, right? Being shown on TV delayed. No one wants to watch, delayed sports anymore.
Yeah.
If they bet, blah, blah, blah. So I understand it was a bummer. I also know that the sport is big enough now that if they would have just aired it at 6 a.m. or 5 a.m., whatever time it was, they would have watched. People would have watched. I honestly think more people would have watched because there were so many people complaining about it being delayed. The UK has to watch the UFC at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning all the time because Dana caters to here.
Sure.
Australia, same thing. But
they also had a lot to compete against. There were New Year's Eve football bowl games.
Yeah.
There was just New Year's Eve events. I mean, I feel like
since it wasn't a pay-per-view, I think they should have just ran it. Unless for some reason, I mean, I guess it's not like a regular channel. Something else wasn't replacing it. It's Showtime. They could have just ran it. So I'm not sure what the hang-up was there. But it was a kind of a bummer because I woke up early in the morning, and as soon as I got on Instagram,
Oh, you knew it had happened.
it was 2-0 Bellator. And Bellator had posted 2-0.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh man. And then 3-0 Bellator, 4-0 Bellator. Then I saw AJ McKee, someone had his phone and streamed his fight live from his
wow.
phone.
Okay.
So while I was out walking like I do in the morning,
Yeah.
I watched his fight live.
Okay.
From the phone, I thought he lost the fight. I was like, man, he clearly lost the fight. From the angle that whoever his friend was holding the phone. And I'm like, dang it. But once we were 3-0, I didn't care after that. I just wanted to win the but I thought he lost the fight. And then I was like, man, that's a bad decision. And then everyone's posting robbery, So I was like, man, well, weird that we'd get the call over there.
Yeah.
So when I sat down to watch the fight that night, I had Lucas come watch with me and tell me what he thought. Well, after the first round was over, I had AJ winning the first round in the first time I watched it because he got a takedown and control position. I had him losing the next 2 rounds.
Okay.
Well, when I watched it live, he clearly won the fight. I think I was just a little panicked because the guy had his back body triangle. He was trying to choke him. I thought he had it for over half the round, which would have, solidified that round. He didn't. I thought AJ's jump over to head stomp got met with a foot up that sent him over the top that didn't land. It landed. Another stomp to the body landed. A soccer kick over the top landed.
Yes.
He took advantage of the rule set and was prepared to use them. And he did lose position. He lost position in the second and the third round, but it wasn't for as long as I thought it was. And he clearly won. I was like, okay, he as I was sitting there, talking to Luke, I was like, oh yeah, I said, after the second round was over, I said, oh well, unless something crazy happens in the third round, I got him winning the fight now because he won the first 2, and then he won the last round as well. Anytime he'd get out of something, he'd go right to damage. Like he'd go right to putting damage on his opponent, and so I thought he looked good. I think he's gonna have his hands full at 155 in Bellator. Usman is gonna be a hard fight for him. If that fight happens, whoever he fights, if he fights anybody that's right there at the top, it's gonna be a tough fight.
Speaking of the Nurmagomedov family, it's cool to see Khabib there.
Yeah.
Sitting right next to Scott Coker.
And right behind him was Hoist Gracie.
Yes.
Right next to him was Connery, which is Hoist's kid, who fought on Luke's Bellator card before. Like all 4 of them were sitting right there. I was like,
that was
all
pretty
right.
cool.
Yeah, so AJ, I'm sure people expected because the guy was so good on the ground. He was stuck in 15 triangles. The guy shot up for triangles and he'd posture up. He wasn't stuck in triangles, but the guy's legs were crossed in a position where the triangle would come from. But he'd posture, get out, punch, posture, get out, punch. And
all that happened in AJ's corner, so he was getting
Yeah.
coaching that about
Yeah.
almost as close as you and I are.
Yeah, it was-
being
they
like,
were
hey,
that
I
close.
mean, it was like
For
he
sure.
posture up, and you could hear him. Posture up, and it seemed like he did a really good job defending. all of
he
that.
did. So his ground is, I don't want to say underrated because I'm not sure if anybody underrates his ground, but it is, in my opinion, I underestimated how good his ground was. I know he had a lot of submission wins. I think he's got 7 in Bellator or 6 in Bellator. But I got a lot more respect for his grappling. It's solid.
He looked really. He looked so good in the ring. That's the first time I think I've watched McKee fight. And I was number one, I was excited. I was just like, I can't wait to watch this kid fight. And he just seemed so confident, and he seemed like his skill level was so high.
And he's 20-1 now?
Yeah, I'm pulling up his record. Yeah, he's 20-1.
21.
That's right.
And his one was a very close split decision to
Pitbull.
So I mean, and essentially he's 21-0, or 20.
Yeah, he's
20-0.
one vote away from.
Yeah. So he's a lot of experience winning, a lot of ring time. He's got a handful of decisions in there that he's a professional. He's tough, man. He's gonna be a good tough fight for anybody at 55. but I think there's a few guys that are going to give him tough fights at 55.
I feel like AJ was the best of the Bellator fighters to taking advantage of the new rule
Absolutely.
set. You saw him, it was a couple stomps attempted,
Yeah.
the soccer kick that landed.
Yeah.
I feel like he understood the rule changes and took advantage of them more than any of the other Bellator fighters.
For sure. I think he was in the position to a lot also because he was on top a lot. His guy was not opposed to being on the bottom attacking.
Yep.
So it opened up a lot of positions for AJ to do that from.
And do you think that was because Souza just had enough confidence in his ground game that he was willing to get down there?
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure he thought he was going to submit him.
Were you impressed with AJ's defense when Souza was on his back in round 2? He was on his back a lot in round 2, and he kept working to try and get underneath, and it seemed like AJ's defense was locked
And at
down.
one point, AJ looked up at him like that and was like, nope.
And then he just started throwing
and then punched him, but he looked at him like, you're not choking me.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was kind of where I felt like I either underestimated his jiu-jitsu or overestimated the other guys, but I think it's probably underestimated AJ's. He's solid, and I know that guy, everyone hyped that guy up so much that I thought, oh man, he got there early in the round with a body triangle.
Yep.
And I was like, well, this is probably a wrap. And then never really got close, I don't think, to finishing.
Big John was talking about how he shouldn't have gone for the sub. He should have started working on damage and getting AJ to make a mistake and then try and work his arms underneath to get. Did you agree with that commentary? Does that make sense?
You got to punch, unless you're able to get under the neck right off the bat.
Yeah.
You got to punch, control the arm, punch. Ideally, you're on top, and putting their belly down, then it's a lot easier to get the sub. But he was just kind of content fighting for the neck, and AJ just kept countering the same way.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And AJ looks so calm in that moment.
Oh, yeah.
He was not panicking at all. His body language was relaxed. His facial expressions were relaxed. Like you said, he looked back and was like, bro, this isn't going to happen.
Right.
It was cool to see him that relaxed in what could have been a dangerous place. I mean,
oh, no question. He's like Luke. He came up with a dad that had fought his entire life.
Yep.
His dad fought all over the place. Super tough, great wrestler. AJ came up underneath that, and then all the guys that Antonio was training with. Tracy Hess, one of my black belts, trains there, so they've got a lot of the good jiu-jitsu guys as well. And so he's got a ton of experience, even not counting his 21 fights.
Yeah.
So now with all those fights, of course he's calm in there, and that's why, you look at Luke when he's fighting, and it's like, he doesn't look phased at all by anything.
Right. I even saw a video, AJ, I think it was kind of one of those, biographical clips, and he drives by this alley, and AJ is like, that's where I learned to fight, right there. And there's this alley between two houses, and he's like, we threw down there, and it's just like, whoa.
Yeah.
That's a tough way to learn how to fight right there, But
Yeah.
I think that experience, I think even maybe as much, being on the street and knowing that, you can handle yourself there.
Oh,
and then
for
you come
sure.
in and get
For sure.
the proper education.
That's how I had experience before fighting as well. Like I had fought, I don't know, once or twice before I ever had my first professional fight.
Once or twice?
Yeah. So it definitely helps to have that, comfortable feeling, getting about to get into a fight.
Yeah.
So
Understanding what that feels like. So Bellator went 5-0.
5-0. I told you. I said it could go 5-0.
Either way.
Yep. I went 5-0 one way.
And I feel like, with the exception of the split decision, it was pretty solid. What do you think is next for these, co-promotions?
And look, they had not to take anything away from anybody, but Juan Archuleta was not the champ. He was coming off a win but a loss. Before that, he got knocked out of the tournament. Horiguchi was coming off 2 losses in Bellator. What if Patchy was there? What if Rufian Stotts was there? What if Usman Nurmagomedov was there?
Yeah.
They didn't even they had some of their best guys, but not all of their best guys.
For sure.
And
sure.
Elite like Pitbull and AJ, the best guys, for sure.
Yep.
But Juan Archuleta those guys are obviously right there at the top.
Yeah.
But there are guys that just beat them recently that weren't there. I hope they do it again. I hope they go back again next year and continue to do something like that. I thought it was awesome.
Do you think Dana's pretty confident in who he is and what he thinks? And I was as I was thinking about it on the way here, I'm like, I could see Dana saying, "What's in it for me? What's
Right.
the upside for UFC to do this?"
There isn't. There's absolutely not. It's like, let me go back to Antonio McKee. I knocked out Antonio McKee, highlight reel finish.
Yep.
And I was losing every second up until the part.
Left leg kick 9 seconds into round 2.
Right leg.
Right leg.
Yeah. But I was losing every minute up until that knockout.
Yep.
Right. His wrestling was beating me. He was holding me against the fence, and I couldn't do anything. From that point on, he wanted to fight me forever. And I was like, bro, what do I have to gain?
Yeah.
I'm sure not going to knock you out that way again.
Yeah.
Maybe, but chances are no.
That's your only head kick knockout of your career.
It's my only knockout of
That's
my career.
Okay.
Everything else was submissions.
Yeah.
So you'd have to pay me a lot of money.
Sure.
And at that point in time, no one wanted to pay a lot of money for anything.
Sure.
So there was nothing in it for me at all to take that fight again. And that's, it's the same for the UFC. The UFC throws 5 guys in there and one loses. And there's already a
black
big
guy,
thing. Yeah,
right?
there's already a big thing.
Yeah.
And there are definitely guys that could lose. And they sure wouldn't send anybody that wasn't their best guy.
Yeah.
Unless they sent somebody that was like outside the top 10 so they could say, oh, it's not one of our top guys.
I mean, it'd be interesting if they sent like a Habsamat. Technically not the best guy, but that dude's an animal.
I think he'd run over everybody over there.
I agree.
I don't think they would send anyone. I don't think they wouldn't. They see themselves here.
Yeah.
And they're not going to let someone else gain. Like, first of all, the walkout was Bellator banners giant.
Yeah.
It was awesome. I loved to see it. Bellator was everywhere in the Saitama Super Arena. So I loved that. The UFC is not going to share anything with anybody. That's Dana.
Yeah.
He's not going to share
And
anything with anybody.
I get it, but I also look at it and say, Bellator absolutely one-upped the UFC because they took it and they dominated.
And the UFC Dana would gain huge respect from all of his fans if he allowed it to happen.
Yep.
All the UFC fans, but they wouldn't do it.
Interesting. It's too bad. It was a lot of fun.
Can't wait till next one.
I was super stoked for Bellator and cheering for him, and the clean sweep felt good,
Oh yeah. I look at everything from different perspectives, and I'm thinking, all right, they're on the level.
Yeah.
They're on the level of Rizin. Now people are talking about them doing it with ONE FC.
That'd be fun.
Whatever, but I just know that
Bellator
our good
and ONE
guys,
FC?
yeah,
Oh, that'd be fun.
our good guys are as good as the good guys.
Be interesting to see like a Rodtang, who is very much a Muay Thai guy on ONE FC. Going
I'd
up
fight him
against.
if we could start from the knees. Can we start from the knees and just like tip him?
Have you seen Rodtang fight?
Oh, bro.
That dude has.
He's a monster.
There is no chin. I don't think anybody has a chin in mixed martial arts anywhere like Rodtang does.
Yeah.
That guy's insane.
He's a monster.
So cool. It was good stuff. Enjoyed
Awesome.
it. Felt proud to be on Bellator side.
For sure. Happy New Year, guys. Thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe to the channel.
It is all over, just like that.